Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montavilla Sewing Center, and today we're talking about the Opal 650. In this video, we're going to talk about getting started sewing with your machine. Now, to start out with, make sure you watch my other video on how to thread your machine so that it's all threaded up correctly. Most of the sewing that you're going to be doing is a straight stitch or a zigzag. I just find that in my experience that's the majority of sewing. I also do some buttonholes and some free motion quilting and things like that, but mostly straight stitch and zigzag are what I use the most. So I'm going to show you how to do that. To start with, look down here on your operations panel and you'll see this little sewing machine. That kind of corresponds, it does correspond to this sewing machine up here. So up here, this is not a touch screen, this is just information, but down here we want to choose the fabric that we're going to be sewing with. I find that medium woven is usually what I'm sewing, and that would be like your quilt weight cotton. Now if I'm sewing some denim, then I'd go with the woven heavy, okay, but I'm just sewing some medium weight cotton. There I go. So woven medium. You also have the options of lightweight knit, medium weight knit, heavyweight knit, and leather and vinyl. But this is the woven medium. And then I want to choose just straight seaming. Now down here we have different procedures that you can do, and when you push that button, for instance, if I was going to do buttonholes, there I go. That gives me a straight square end, just very common type of buttonhole. I can also choose other buttonholes up here by just typing in the number that's below that buttonhole. But we're just doing straight seaming, which means number 1 right there. So you see up here, it says woven medium seam. We're just going to do a straight seam. Now, once you get started, put your presser foot down, and you can either use the start-stop button. You push that, start, push it again, stop. The stop means it's going to give a little locking stitch at the end. So I'm going to show you that. If I push this, then I push this, it stops and gives me a locking stitch. It stitches in place. Now what if I want a locking stitch at the beginning? I'm going to move this ahead a little bit. In that case, I would push fix. And see that little fix shows up there? That means it fixes those threads in a little knot. So I'm going to slow this down. This is my speed control. There's the indicator for it right there. I'm going to slow this down so you can kind of see what's happening over here. And this time I'm going to use the foot control, because you can use either one and you do not have to disconnect your foot control for the start-stop button to work. So here I go. It does a locking stitch and then it starts sewing. Now if I want a locking stitch at the end, I just push stop and then I put my foot on the foot control. It does a locking stitch in place without taking any more stitches. And I keep my foot down on the foot control until it stops making that little knot stitch. So that's a nice little way to have a locking stitch at the beginning and at the end. Now the locking stitch is not very noticeable, so it's a nice one to do if you have your where you want to seal the ends of your seam on something that shows, like a quilt or something. But your back stitch is going to be a little sturdier, and I'll show you how to do that. Back stitch, start sewing a little bit, press that, hold it. As long as you're holding it, then it will backstitch, and once you let go of it, it stops. Now, of course, when you are sewing down to the end of your fabric, you want to make sure not to sew off the edge of your fabric, because if you do, you could get a thread tangle, and I got a whole other video about that, thread tangles. At this point, I want to just push my backstitch, hold it, and let it go. Okay. Now, I want to show you an interesting thing that I discovered about this backstitch button. You can actually sew backwards by just pushing this button, let it go, and get started sewing. Look at that. Start sewing backwards. Push it again, it'll start sewing forwards. But that's because I pushed it and let it go. If I pushed it and held it, it would just stitch backwards, stitch forward. So experiment with that. It works basically like any other backstitch button. It just has the extra feature of being able to continuously sew backwards. So there we go on that. Now, the stop button is for if you're doing, actually, I can show you. You can even use it with the foot control. And when you put your thread under your foot, now this foot has a little divot there where you can see closer to the needle. Make sure you slide your thread along the left-hand side, right next to the A. And that'll make sure your thread gets underneath the foot. You want to make sure it's under the foot. So I want my fixed stick and stitch at the beginning. So forward, push stop, keep my foot down. There we go. Yeah, I showed you that. Okay, now what about zigzag? Okay, for zigzag, it's really a useful thing to have if you're doing like applique, anytime you want to seal a raw edge, or if you have woven fabric. Now this is an example of a zigzag. Down here you've got a stitch that does a 3-step zigzag, and that's going to keep your woven edge nice and flat. But if you want to just do a regular zigzag, look up here at category number 1, there's your zigzag. Now most of the time, unless you change it, like if you turn on your machine's going to be in category 1. The other categories are some utility stitches, but mostly decorative stitches are the other categories. And I've got a different video on how to get into those. You could also read your book. I mean, it tells you about that too. Okay, so zigzag is going to be number 4. So I push number 4 down here, and it puts me into zigzag. You can widen your zigzag if you want to. You can narrow it. You can shorten that zigzag, and you can press and hold. Now, if you really get it right down to 0, now that zigzag is just going to zigzag in place, which is a really handy thing to have if you're doing like a bar tack or something like that. Now, to put it back to default, notice it's not in default right now. It's in something else. I just push 4. And now you can see dark letters on a light background is the default for that. So that's what I did this zigzag here on the edge of this lightweight cotton fabric, or the medium weight cotton fabric. And it worked out fine to seal the edge. But if I had something a little stiffer like this, I'd want to widen that zigzag, and I could do that because it takes a little, it's more coarsely woven. Okay, zigzag again, you can use that fixed stitch. I'll give you an example of that. What fix, when I press that, and that appeared there, and so we're going to have a little locking in place stitch, and then it starts stitching. If I want to have another locking in place stitch, now notice it goes back and forth. So if I do my fix or my stop stitch right now, it's going to do that stop stitch on the outside there. Yeah, I got it. Okay, and notice it shows right here that you have it. There we go. Actually, I'm wrong. It was on the inside, which is good. If you're doing the edges of some fabric, you want your locking stitch to be in the fabric, not out on the air like that. All right. Now, another thing that's helpful to have is your needle up, needle down. I'm holding the thread tails to make sure that they don't get pulled down inside the machine while I'm doing needle down. Needle up, needle down. Also, you can use your foot control, tap it once, it goes down, needle down, tap it a second time. Now, if you hold it too long, it's going to do an entire stitch cycle. But this is, the fact that the machine has this is a really neat feature, because this means that you don't have to move your hand wheel a lot to make sure it's in the all the way up position for you to take your fabric out. So, and then your speed slider, that's going to be really important for once you're getting used to your machine. Have it at a slower speed until you kind of get the rhythm of how to use it. This is going to prevent you from going too fast. Even if you put your foot control all the way down, pedal to the metal, you've got, and that little beep, that means you can't do anything more than that. Okay, so watch. I've got pedal to the metal. It's not going to go any faster than that. However, press and hold. And there we go. There we go. All the way fast. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference between slowest and fastest. Really nice feature to have. Okay, so that is your basic getting started with your Opal 650. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, give us a thumbs up. And if you have comments or questions, you can leave those in the area down below. We have lots of other videos here on our Montavilla YouTube channel, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye.